Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear brothers and sisters, and welcome back to the Islamic SHAHADA channel. India is a nation of deep pluralism, a mosaic of languages, cultures, and faiths, where religious diversity shapes everyday life and national debate. Among these communities, Islam in India holds an exceptional place. It is one of the oldest and most influential religions on the subcontinent, and today India hosts one of the world's largest Muslim populations, while Muslims remain a minority within a Hindu-majority democracy. Historically, Islam arrived in India through traders, scholars, and conquerors, and over centuries it became woven into the country's social fabric. The legacy is visible everywhere, from monumental Mughal architecture and centuries of Islamic scholarship to Urdu literature, Sufi music, and local customs that blend Hindu and Muslim influences. These cultural contributions mean that Muslim heritage in India is not peripheral, but central to the broader idea of Indian culture. In contemporary terms, discussions about Muslim population India often focus on scale and diversity rather than a single uniform experience. Estimates for 2025 place the number of Muslims in India in the hundreds of millions, making India home to a vast Muslim community with varied regional concentrations, notably in states such as Uttar Pradesh, West Bengal, Bihar, Kerala, Assam, and Jammu and Kashmir. This demographic reality gives the topic global relevance. It is the largest Muslim minority population living inside a non-Muslim majority country. At the same time, multiple official reviews and independent studies have documented persistent gaps in education, employment, and public services affecting many Muslim citizens. The landmark Sachar Committee Report, 2006, remains a key reference for understanding socioeconomic disparities and policy recommendations aimed at inclusion. These findings frame much of the policy debate about equality, affirmative action, and targeted development for minority communities. Islam first reached the Indian subcontinent not primarily by conquest, but by the rhythm of the monsoon winds and the routes of trade. From the 7th century onward, Arab traders sailed the Arabian Sea to the western coastlines of Gujarat and the Malabar coast in present-day Kerala, establishing ports, commercial communities, and early Muslim settlements that predate many later political empires. These coastal links created the first durable Islamic presences in South Asia and fostered cultural exchange, intermarriage, and the spread of religious practices along maritime corridors. At the same time, a northern strand of Islamic influence entered the subcontinent through military campaigns and political expansion. The early Umayyad incursions into Sindh in the 8th century opened a long, complex chapter of interaction between Central Asian and South Asian polities. Over the next 5 centuries, waves of Central Asian dynasties, mercenaries, and local converts set the stage for more permanent Muslim rule in parts of northern India. These developments culminated in the emergence of the Delhi Sultanate in the early 13th century, a multi-dynastic Muslim polity that reshaped northern India's political map and introduced new administrative systems, Persianate court culture, and monumental Islamic architecture. Crucially, Islam's spread across the subcontinent was not only a matter of state power. The arrival and outreach of Sufi saints and itinerant scholars played a central role in converting and integrating diverse communities. Sufis used local languages and devotional practices that resonated with peasants and urban dwellers alike, creating syncretic traditions and spiritual centers, from khanqahs to dargahs, that anchored Islam socially and culturally across regions such as Bengal, the Deccan, and the Gangetic Plain. This spiritual dimension helped Islam become embedded in everyday life long before the rise of imperial dynasties. The medieval period closed with another major transition, the end of the Delhi Sultanate and the rise of the Mughal Empire in 1526, founded by Babur after the First Battle of Panipat. The Mughals consolidated and expanded Indo-Islamic governance, patronized arts and architecture on an unparalleled scale, and further integrated Persianate culture into South Asian political life. Together, trade, Sufi networks, regional sultanates, and successive empires created a plural and layered history, one that explains why Islamic heritage in India today ranges from coastal mosques and merchant lineages to grand imperial monuments and vibrant local traditions. Islam's imprint on the Indian subcontinent is most visible in stone, paint, and speech. From imperial tombs and grand congregational mosques to intimate Sufi shrines and everyday words, Islamic cultural contributions have been woven into India's public life for centuries. The Taj Mahal, a UNESCO World Heritage Site and the global symbol of Mughal architecture, encapsulates how Islamic aesthetic principles, symmetry, geometric design, calligraphic art, and garden planning were adapted to South Asian materials and traditions, producing monuments that remain central to India's cultural identity. The Mughal era, in particular, produced a distinctive Indo-Islamic architectural language: red sandstone forts and white marble mausolea, lofty domes, slender minarets, and intricate pietra dura inlay. Major urban mosques, such as Jama Masjid in Delhi and historic congregational mosques in Hyderabad and other cities, are not only places of worship, but also civic landmarks that shaped city skylines and public rituals. These structures reflect a blending of Persianate court culture with local building practices, a synthesis that underpins much of what is called Mughal architecture. Beyond stone, Islamic patronage transformed the arts. The Mughal courts sponsored miniature painting, book arts, and calligraphy that fused Persian, Central Asian, and Indian motifs. Painters created delicate manuscripts and illustrated chronicles that remain prized in museums worldwide. Sufi traditions fostered devotional music and poetry, from ghazals and qawwalis to regional devotional forms, turning shrines such as the Ajmer Dargah into living centers of music, pilgrimage, and interfaith encounter. These artistic currents helped embed Islamic aesthetics in everyday cultural expression across provinces and languages. Language is another enduring thread. Urdu, an Indo-Aryan language shaped by Persian and Arabic vocabulary and by the cosmopolitan courts of Delhi and Lucknow, became a major literary and cultural medium in South Asia. Urdu poetry and prose, with its ghazals, nazms, and courtly literature, became instruments of cultural exchange and social identity, influencing film, theater, and modern journalism across the subcontinent. The survival and evolution of Urdu illustrate how Islamic cultural forms adapted locally while also connecting India to broader Persianate worlds. Today, these cultural legacies face both celebration and challenge. Preservation needs, contested heritage narratives, and pressures from urban development mean many historic sites require active conservation. At the same time, Islamic arts and language continue to thrive in literature, music, and popular culture. In short, the Islamic heritage in India is both a catalog of world-class monuments and a living tapestry of music, poetry, language, and everyday customs that continue to shape modern India. As of 2025, India remains home to the world's largest Muslim minority population, with estimates ranging between 200 million to 210 million Muslims, which correspond to about 14% to 15% of the nation's total population. This demographic scale places India third among countries with the highest numbers of Muslims globally, after Indonesia and Pakistan, despite India being a non-Muslim majority state. Between the decades following 1950 and 2015, India witnessed a substantial rise in its Muslim population, increasing by over 43% in sheer numbers, while the proportion of Hindus in the national population saw a modest decline. This reflects changing fertility rates, migration patterns, and urbanization dynamics. However, recent data also suggest a slowing growth rate. While fertility rates among Muslims historically were higher compared to other religious groups, those gaps have narrowed. birth rates are falling, and younger generations are moving to urban areas, leading to reduced fertility and changing family size norms. Such trends indicate that Muslim population growth may align more closely with national averages in coming decades. Projections toward 2050 show this community continuing to grow both in absolute number and in proportion. Some studies estimate that by mid-century, Muslims in India might number over 300 million, making up approximately 18% of the population. Yet even with this growth, they would remain a minority, part of India's pluralistic fabric. The Muslim community in India is not evenly spread across the country, but shows strong regional concentrations that shape culture, politics, and social life. The largest share resides in Uttar Pradesh, India's most populous state, where Muslims make up nearly 20% of the population. This translates into more than 40 million people, giving Uttar Pradesh the single largest Muslim population of any state in India. The influence of Islam here is visible in the historic cities of Lucknow and Varanasi, where mosques, madrasas, and Urdu culture form an inseparable part of the local identity. In West Bengal, Muslims account for around 27% of the state's population, concentrated especially in the districts bordering Bangladesh. Here, Islamic traditions are woven into Bengal's literary and cultural heritage, from Urdu and Bengali poetry to Sufi shrines that attract both Hindus and Muslims. Neighboring Bihar also has a large Muslim presence, nearly 17% of its residents, with Patna and surrounding regions known for their vibrant Islamic seminaries and heritage sites. Moving further east, Assam has one of the highest proportions of Muslims in India, close to 35% of the population. This makes Islam a defining feature of Assam's demographic and political landscape, influencing everything from local elections to linguistic diversity. Assam's unique blend of indigenous Muslim communities and Bengali-origin Muslims adds layers to its complex identity. In the north, Jammu and Kashmir stands out with a Muslim majority population of about 68 to 70%, the only region in India where Muslims are the dominant group. Islam here has a strong Sufi tradition expressed through shrines, devotional music, and a spiritual culture deeply rooted in Kashmiri society. Despite political changes in recent years, the valley remains a center of Islamic heritage and identity within the Indian Union. In the south, Kerala has a Muslim population of around 26 to 27%, with deep historical roots linked to Arab traders who arrived centuries ago. Kerala's Muslims, often called Mappilus, played key roles in trade, literature, and anti-colonial resistance. Today, they are also well known for their high rates of education and labor migration to the Gulf, which has strengthened transnational Islamic connections. The socio-economic condition of India's Muslim community has long been a subject of national attention and policy debate. The landmark Sachar Committee Report, 2006, documented wide-ranging gaps: lower access to formal credit, underrepresentation in public employment, below-average access to public services, and concentrated spatial disadvantage in districts with large Muslim populations. The report concluded that Muslims were often worse off than many other disadvantaged groups and recommended targeted measures, from financial inclusion to better educational provisioning, to bridge these deficits. Those recommendations continue to shape the discussion about Muslim socioeconomic status in India. Since Sachar, measurable improvements have occurred in some areas, but deep challenges persist. Official labor and education surveys show rising literacy rates among Muslims. The periodic Labor Force Survey reported a Muslim literacy rate of about 79.5% in 2023 to 2024, closing but not yet matching the national average. At the same time, participation of Muslim women in the labor force has increased meaningfully in recent years, signaling shifting gender norms and economic participation within families. a trend that experts link to better schooling and urban job opportunities. Yet workforce participation overall and representation in formal public employment remain lower than national averages, underlining ongoing gaps in economic inclusion. Education has been a critical battleground for change. Primary and secondary enrollment among Muslim children has improved thanks to universal schooling schemes, scholarship programs, and civil society interventions. In urban centers, more Muslim youth now attend private and English medium schools and pursue professional courses in engineering, medicine, and business, while some madrasa reform initiatives and state efforts aim to integrate modern subjects, mathematics, science, and digital literacy, into traditional religious curricula. Implementation is uneven across states, but the direction points toward greater alignment between religious education and labor market skills. Economically, the picture is mixed. Rural Muslim households still disproportionately rely on informal labor, petty trade, and low-paid services, keeping poverty and vulnerability rates above the national mean in many districts. At the same time, an urban Muslim middle class has been steadily rising. Entrepreneurs, small business owners, professionals, and diasporic families who send remittances from the Gulf and other destinations. States with high migration to the Gulf, notably Kerala, have seen large inflows that boost household incomes, spur investment in education, and underwrite small enterprises, a dynamic that helps explain pockets of rapid socio-economic mobility within the community. Policy responses remain crucial. The SHAHADA recommendations, improved access to bank credit, targeted scholarships, better representation in government jobs, and area-based development for minority concentrations, provide a blueprint, but their execution has been inconsistent. Experts argue that sustained gains will depend on three linked priorities: continued expansion of quality schooling and vocational training, financial inclusion, and entrepreneurship support for small firms, and robust anti-discrimination measures in housing and employment. If these levers are pulled effectively, India's Muslim community could convert education gains into widespread economic mobility, reshaping both local markets and national growth trajectories. In the complex tapestry of Indian democracy, the political identity of Muslims is caught between constitutional rights and contested citizenship. Over the past decade, the rise of Hindu nationalism under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Bharatiya Janata Party, BJP, has triggered both political gains and serious anxieties among India's Muslim minority. Many feel their voices are marginalized, their institutions under scrutiny, and their right to belonging questioned. In the most recent national elections, 2024, Muslim representation in parliament remained disproportionately low. The BJP fielded almost no Muslim candidates, and while Muslims make up about 14 to 15% of India's population, they hold only a small fraction of seats in the lower house. Critics argue that both the ruling party and opposition parties view Muslims largely as voter blocs rather than as leaders-makers, reinforcing patterns of political exclusion. The Citizenship Amendment Act, CAA, and the proposed or deployed National Register of Citizens, NRC, have only intensified concerns over political identities. These laws and processes are widely viewed by critics as targeting Muslims, particularly migrants and Bengali origin communities, in states like Assam and West Bengal. Allegations of discriminatory implementation and lack of due process have been major flashpoints, with civil society groups, political parties, and international observers warning about potential statelessness and erosion of rights. Perhaps the most alarming recent trend is a wave of deportations and forced expulsions of Muslim individuals, often Bengali-speaking, from border states, especially Assam. Between May and June 2025, over 1,500 people, including families, elderly, and even Indian citizens with documentation were forcibly moved towards the Bangladesh border, often under threat or coercion. Many possess local or municipal records supporting their Indian residence, yet bureaucratic verification has failed to prevent wrongful expulsions. Rights organizations have condemned these as violations of both domestic law and international humanitarian standards. These issues of political identity are intertwined with religious and cultural symbolism. Controversial bills like the anti-conversion laws, debates over hijab bans, disputes over waqf land, and state interference in religious endowments are often framed as national or cultural priorities by proponents of Hindutva ideology. To many Muslims, they look like legal instruments of marginalization aimed at restricting religious freedom, assembly, and symbols of public identity. Yet democracy still offers avenues for resistance and identity assertion. Muslim civil society groups, independent media, opposition political parties, and legal advocacy have repeatedly challenged discriminatory laws, won court interventions, and raised public awareness domestically and internationally. Cases such as Sonali Khatun's recent deportation case, where the High Court demanded clarification from central authorities, highlight that the rule of law, while under pressure, remains a relevant arena for struggle. Islamophobia in India today shapes many ordinary moments of Muslim life: where people live, what jobs they can access, how children experience school, and whether places of worship and markets feel safe. Over the last several years, there has been a noticeable rise in communal incidents and hate speech that disproportionately target Muslims. Media monitoring and civil society reports recorded a sharp increase in communal riots and mob violence in 2024, including lynchings linked to cow vigilantism and accusations about interfaith relationships. These episodes do not only produce tragic loss of life, they also create an atmosphere of fear and everyday insecurity that affects economic activity, schooling, and social mixing. Discrimination extends beyond episodic violence into routine exclusions. Difficulty obtaining housing in mixed neighborhoods, barriers to formal employment, profiling by law enforcement, and online harassment that amplifies stereotypes. International and national surveys show that a significant share of Muslims report having faced religious discrimination in recent years, while targeted political rhetoric and incendiary public statements, tracked in several hate speech audits, have normalized hostile language against Muslim communities in some public spheres. The cumulative effect is structural: lower trust in public institutions, reduced willingness to interact across religious lines, and self-segregation in education and neighborhoods. A particularly troubling development in 2025 has been large-scale evictions and forced expulsions in parts of northeastern India, where authorities have detained and, in many reported cases, pushed hundreds of ethnic Bengali Muslims across the Bangladesh border. Human rights groups have documented cases where people with local documentation, elderly citizens and whole families, were removed without adequate legal process, triggering domestic and international condemnation and raising questions about due process, statelessness, and the rule of law. These mass expulsions have both immediate humanitarian consequences and long-term social effects. They deepen community trauma, unsettle livelihoods, and harden political identities. Despite these pressures, Muslim communities continue to protect and renew social ties through multiple forms of resilience. Local interfaith initiatives, Sufi and shrine-based networks, community legal clinics, and civil society coalitions work to diffuse tensions, provide legal aid, and create shared public rituals that bridge divides. Families prioritize education and livelihood diversification as ways to reduce vulnerability, while cultural forms, poetry, music, marketplace commerce, and neighborhood festivals keep everyday pluralism alive. At the same time, many activists call for stronger institutional responses, better hate crime recording, legal safeguards against unlawful evictions, enforcement of anti-discrimination laws, and civic education to counter communal stereotyping. Muslim women in India occupy a complex position at the intersection of tradition, law, and modern opportunity. Over the past 2 decades, they have made measurable gains in education and public life, yet they continue to confront structural barriers in employment, political representation, and legal rights. Understanding their experience requires looking at hard data and lived realities, rising literacy and labor force participation, the long shadow of personal law debates, landmark legal reforms, and high-profile social controversies that shape everyday decisions about dress, marriage, and work. Education has been a foundation for change. National surveys show that literacy among Muslims has increased substantially. Official figures put Muslim literacy at about 79.5% in 2023 to 2024, narrowing the gap with the national average. Improvements in primary and secondary enrollment, driven by scholarship schemes, NGO programs, and community initiatives, have raised expectations among families that education can be a route out of economic precarity. In several states, notably Kerala, parts of Karnataka, and selected districts in Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, Muslim girls are entering higher education in growing numbers and enrolling in professional streams such as medicine, engineering, and teacher training. These trends are changing household priorities and creating new cohorts of skilled women who can access formal employment. Labor market participation remains a battleground. While overall female labor force participation in India is low by global standards, recent periodic labor force survey data show a notable rise in Muslim women's workforce participation, from roughly 15% in 2021 to 22 to about 21.4% in 2023, 2023 to 24. This increase reflects a mix of factors: urban job growth, expansion of service and informal sectors, targeted skill programs, and shifting social norms that make paid work more acceptable for women. Yet many Muslim women still work in informal, low-paid, and precarious jobs. Formal sector representation and public service employment lag behind, and occupational segregation remains strong. Political voice and leadership remain limited. Muslim women are strikingly underrepresented in elected office and political institutions. Across India's parliamentary history, only a tiny fraction of women MPs have been Muslim, a pattern that points to both gender and communal barriers within party structures and candidate selection processes. This underrepresentation constrains political advocacy for issues that disproportionately affect Muslim women, from access to welfare programs to protection against communal violence and legal reform. Legal reforms and family law debates have had direct and symbolic impacts. The Supreme Court's rulings and later legislative action on triple talaq, culminating in judicial challenges, and the 2019 law that criminalized instantaneous triple talaq, transformed the public conversation about Muslim women's rights within personal law. Some activists hailed these changes as victories for gender justice, while critics warned that criminalization without adequate social supports could have unintended consequences. Beyond triple talaq, debates continue over personal law reform, property rights, and access to legal aid, all of which affect women's bargaining power inside families and courts. Social controversies around dress and public presence have also become flashpoints. The hijab controversy that erupted in Karnataka in 2022, when educational institutions and courts debated whether hijab is an essential religious practice, illustrated how questions of religious attire can rapidly escalate into national debates about constitutional rights, uniform policies, and social cohesion. These disputes are not merely legal. They shape whether young Muslim women feel safe and welcome in classrooms, workplaces, and public space, and they influence family decisions about education and mobility. At the same time, Muslim women exercise agency in myriad ways. Grassroots women's groups, legal aid clinics, and NGOs provide counseling, skills training, and litigation support. Muslim entrepreneurs and professionals create role models in urban centers, and social media gives women new platforms to narrate their own lives. Many families combine religious education with modern vocational training or English medium schooling to expand choices for daughters. These acts of everyday resilience, pursuing a degree, starting a small business, contesting a workplace injustice, are reshaping expectations and creating new spaces for Muslim women's leadership. Yet the path ahead is uneven. Structural issues, discrimination in hiring and housing, under-resourced schools in Muslim-majority districts, limited access to formal credit for women entrepreneurs, and the politicization of cultural practices continue to constrain progress. Experts argue that sustained gains will require coordinated policy action, better implementation of scholarships and affirmative programs, targeted vocational training for women, legal literacy campaigns, expanded childcare and transport infrastructure to enable female work, and legal safeguards that protect women from both domestic abuse and communal discrimination. If these measures are pursued alongside community-led initiatives, the potential for a substantial transformation in Muslim women's economic and civic life is real. The relationship between Islam and modern media in India has shifted dramatically in the last decade. For young Muslims, the internet is not a peripheral space. It is the principal public square where identity is performed, faith is taught, and politics is debated. What was once limited to mosque pulpits and local study circles now spans YouTube lectures, Instagram sermons, WhatsApp study groups, and podcast panels. This digital turn has made online dawah widely accessible. Charismatic young scholars publish short, shareable videos that explain scripture in local languages. Female preachers produce content addressing women's lives, and multilingual creators adapt Islamic teachings for urban and rural viewers alike. The result is a democratization of religious knowledge and a rapid expansion of Muslim cultural production across platforms. Formal and informal online education models, from branded virtual madrasas to independent tutors on video platforms, are reshaping religious learning. These virtual madrasas and apps teach Quran, recitation, Arabic, and theology, while often adding modern subjects such as English and basic computer skills. For many families, especially in diasporic and remote communities, these platforms provide flexible access to scholarship and mentorship that traditional institutions cannot always offer. The hybrid model, combining classical pedagogy with digital tools and asynchronous lessons, is creating a new generation of students who are as comfortable with hadith collections as they are with online forums and digital certificates. Social media is also a front line in the fight against Islamophobia and online hate. Studies and programmatic work documenting digital experiences of Indian Muslims show a marked rise in anti-Muslim speech and targeted harassment, especially around major political events. In response, Muslim creators, civil society groups, and fact-checking organizations have built rapid response networks. Coordinated hashtag campaigns, digital safety trainings, WhatsApp moderation strategies, and partnerships with independent fact-checkers to debunk viral falsehoods. These defensive tactics often run in parallel with positive outreach, educational series, storytelling campaigns, and interfaith content designed to humanize Muslim lives to broader audiences. At the same time, misinformation and polarizing content remain a persistent threat. Investigations into disinformation campaigns and WhatsApp networks show how rumors and edited clips spread rapidly and can catalyze offline violence. This has prompted journalists and researchers to map and expose the mechanics of viral hate and to train communities in digital literacy. Tech policy debates about platform moderation, takedown transparency, and political advertising are therefore central to the safety of Muslim users. Creators regularly press platforms for better enforcement while also experimenting with private group moderation, community reporting, and preemptive contextualization of sensitive posts. Beyond religion and advocacy, the digital sphere has opened economic and creative opportunities. A growing ecosystem of Muslim tech startups, modest fashion e-commerce, halal lifestyle brands, and edtech platforms, taps both domestic demand and global Muslim markets. Young entrepreneurs produce content, run online stores for modest clothing, develop Quranic learning apps, and monetize cultural production on streaming platforms. These ventures not only generate income, but also shape modern Muslim identities, marrying faith, entrepreneurship, and popular culture in visible, aspirational ways. Yet this digital renaissance is ambivalent. Algorithms can amplify both uplifting spiritual content and incendiary propaganda. Platform policy gaps allow hate to linger while penalizing marginalized voices in opaque ways. Moreover, surveillance, doxing, and platform bans sometimes silence activists who document abuses. The net effect is a contested media ecology where the same tools that enable digital dawah and community organizing can also be weaponized against minority users. Creators therefore combine creative outreach with careful risk management, anonymized testimonies, secure messaging practices, and decentralized peer networks that reduce singular dependency on any one platform. India's relationship with the Muslim majority world is complex, strategic, and rapidly evolving. For New Delhi, ties with countries such as Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Egypt, Indonesia, and Turkey are driven by energy security, trade, investment, and geopolitical calculus, even as historical and domestic issues shape perceptions abroad. In the Gulf, economic partnerships and labor links are particularly central. Indian expatriates, many of them Muslim, form a major pool of workers whose remittances remain a cornerstone of India's foreign exchange inflows, helping sustain regional economies and underwriting household life back home, especially in states such as Kerala. These economic and people-to-people ties give India leverage and mutual interest with several Muslim-majority governments. Diplomacy in recent years has shown India pursuing a pragmatic, transactional approach while also seeking political cover and cooperation on regional security. New Delhi has moved to deepen strategic ties with Gulf partners, encouraging deeper engagement with blocs such as BRICS and championing infrastructure projects like the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor, even as it balances delicate relations with Iran and Turkey. At multilateral forums, India has sometimes found sympathetic voices among OIC members. For example, in 2025, several influential Muslim-majority states resisted Pakistan's attempts to internationalize certain bilateral disputes, signaling that many Muslim governments prioritize stability, economic ties, and non-interference over ideological alignment. Yet political developments inside India also shape how it is seen abroad. Reports of communal tensions, citizenship disputes, and high-profile allegations of deportations in 2025 have strained perceptions in parts of the Muslim world and within diaspora communities. Human rights organizations and international media coverage of forcible expulsions of Muslim civilians toward the Bangladesh border have added diplomatic friction and raised questions about due process, matters that foreign capitals take into account when assessing bilateral relations and public opinion at home. These episodes complicate New Delhi's outreach and provide soft power challenges even as official ties deepen. As India moves deeper into the 21st century, the future of Islam in India will be shaped by an unusual combination of demographic trends, economic change, political contestation, and civic resilience. Demographically, major international projections show that India's Muslim population will continue to grow in absolute terms and remain a significant minority within a predominantly Hindu nation, a trend projected to continue through mid-century. These population dynamics create both opportunity and responsibility. Opportunity because a younger Muslim demographic can contribute to innovation, the workforce, and civic renewal. Responsibility because sustained inclusion will require public policy that narrows education and employment gaps. Economically and socially, the path forward depends on converting recent gains in schooling and urban entrepreneurship into broad-based mobility. Where education, vocational training, and digital access expand, Muslim youth are already entering professional fields, launching startups, and creating cultural industries that transcend sectarian divides. Diaspora links and remittances, particularly from the Gulf, will continue to provide capital and transnational networks that help some communities leap forward. Yet large pockets of rural disadvantage and underemployment persist. Without targeted development in lagging districts, regional inequalities could harden, limiting the community's full contribution to India's growth story. Politically, the near term will hinge on how democratic institutions respond to rising majoritarian pressures and how grievances are addressed through law and policy. The politics of citizenship and identity have become especially salient after high-profile cases of evictions and expulsions in 2025 that drew international scrutiny and allegations of due process failures. These episodes, and the domestic debates they provoke, underscore a hard truth. The future of social harmony depends on reinforcing rule of law protections and transparent, fair administrative procedures so that citizenship and civil rights are not conditional on religion or ethnicity. Civil society, interfaith networks, and reform-minded policy research offer clear routes to a more inclusive future. Recent studies and expert reports emphasize district-level development, mosque-based literacy initiatives, madrasa modernization, and private sector partnerships as practical ways to reduce socioeconomic gaps identified by earlier reviews such as the SHAHADA Committee. Implementation matters. Piecemeal or politicized efforts will not be enough. Where programs combine educational quality, access to credit, and anti-discrimination enforcement, the evidence shows communities recover faster from shocks and contribute more robustly to civic life. Soft power and people-to-people ties will also shape perceptions. India's cultural exports, film, cuisine, literature, and its large economically active diaspora in the Gulf, Europe, and North America help sustain positive links with Muslim-majority states and communities. But soft power is fragile. Reports of rights abuses and exclusionary policies damage India's image abroad and complicate diplomacy. For India to be seen as both an economic partner and a plural democracy by Muslim-majority countries, New Delhi will need to demonstrate that economic engagement goes hand in hand with respect for minority rights. Finally, the future is not predetermined. It is contested and contingent. Optimistic scenarios imagine a plural India in which Muslim citizens participate fully in politics, business, and culture, where quality education and technology bridge old divides, and where interfaith cooperation reduces violence and builds shared civic institutions. Pessimistic scenarios warn that unchecked polarization, discriminatory policy, and economic stagnation could deepen marginalization and produce cycles of grievance. The policy choice is clear. Sustained investment in inclusion, transparent rulemaking, and civic education can turn demographic scale into creative potential rather than political friction. For viewers and citizens alike, that choice will determine whether Islam in India remains an integral, dynamic bridge between civilizations, or becomes a source of continuing division. Thanks for watching until the end. I hope it was useful. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.